The headlights cut through the darkness as Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his eyes focused on the winding country road ahead. It was one of those cold November evenings where the temperature drops fast once the sun goes down. In the passenger seat, his 8-year-old daughter Sophie was still buzzing with energy from soccer practice, her cleats making soft thuds against the floor mat as she kicked her feet back and forth. "Dad, did you see my goal today?" Coach Ryan said it was perfect. Daniel smiled, glancing at her briefly. "I saw it, sweetheart." They lived about 20 minutes outside the small town of Millbrook, Ohio, in a modest house that Daniel had bought back when his wife was still alive. The rural root home was peaceful most nights, with nothing but farmland and the occasional house set back from the road. Daniel had driven this path hundreds of times, knew every curve and pothole by heart. Sophie was chattering about her friend's birthday party next weekend when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "What's what, honey?" "Over there." She pointed toward the right side of the road, where the headlights barely reached. "I think I saw something." Daniel slowed down slightly, squinting into the darkness. "Probably just a deer, or—" "No, Dad, stop. I think it's a person." His first instinct was to keep driving. It was dark. They were alone on this empty road, and he had his daughter with him. You hear stories all the time about scams and dangerous situations, but something in Sophie's voice made him press the brake. "Sophie, stay in the car, okay? Lock the doors." "But Dad—" "I mean it. Lock the doors." Daniel pulled over onto the gravel shoulder and turned on his hazard lights. He grabbed his phone, ready to call for help if needed, and stepped out into the cold air. The temperature had dropped to near freezing, and his breath came out in white puffs. As he walked closer, his heart started pounding harder. Sophie was right. There was definitely someone lying in the shallow ditch beside the road, partially hidden by tall grass that had died back for the winter. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Daniel called out, approaching cautiously. No response. He moved closer, pulling out his phone to use the flashlight. What he saw made his stomach drop. It was a man, older, maybe in his 60s, lying on his side in an awkward position. His jacket was torn, his face had visible cuts and bruises, and his lips had an unsettling blue tint to them. "Oh God," Daniel whispered. He knelt down carefully, reaching out to check for a pulse on the man's neck. His skin was ice cold, but there was a pulse. Faint, but there. The man's breathing was shallow and raspy. Behind him, he heard the car door open. "Sophie, I told you to stay in the car. Is he okay?" His daughter's small voice was filled with worry as she stood by the road, refusing to get back in the vehicle. "Go back to the car, please. Now." This time she listened, but she didn't lock herself in. She stood by the open door, watching. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator answered on the second ring, and he quickly explained the situation, giving their location as precisely as he could. "Sir, we're dispatching an ambulance now," the operator said calmly. "But I need to inform you that our nearest available unit is currently responding to a major accident on Route 35. The estimated arrival time to your location is approximately 40 minutes. 40 minutes? Daniel looked down at the man. His breathing seemed to be getting worse, more labored. "I don't think he has 40 minutes. Sir, I understand your concern. I need you to stay with him and keep him warm if possible. Do not move him unless there's immediate danger. Can you do that?" Yes, okay." Daniel ended the call and looked around helplessly. The man was barely conscious, his body temperature dangerously low. 40 minutes in this cold could be the difference between life and death. Sophie appeared beside him again, this time carrying the emergency blanket from their car's trunk. "Here, Dad. We learned about hypothermia at school. We have to keep him warm." Daniel's hands were trembling as he carefully draped the blanket over the stranger. The man's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and confused, before closing again. "What happened to him?" Sophie asked quietly. I don't know, honey. But as Daniel's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he could see more details. The man's clothes were disheveled, his pockets turned inside out. There were drag marks in the dirt, leading from the road to where he lay. This wasn't an accident. Someone had hurt him and left him here. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The man's breathing grew more labored, a rattling sound coming from his chest that Daniel had heard before. In the hospital room, where his wife spent her final days, it was the sound of someone slipping away. Dad, we have to do something. Sophie's voice cracked. We can't just let him die. Daniel looked at his daughter, then at the dying stranger, then back at his phone. 25 minutes to the hospital in town if he drove fast, 40 minutes for the ambulance. The math was simple, but the decision wasn't. Every safety rule he'd ever taught Sophie ran through his head. Don't pick up strangers. Don't put yourself in danger. Protect yourself first. But here was his 8-year-old daughter, looking at him with those eyes that still believed her dad could fix anything, still believed that doing the right thing mattered more than being safe. The man let out a weak groan, and Daniel saw his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. Okay, Daniel said, making a decision that went against every cautious instinct in his body. Really? Her eyes widened. Really. But I need you to be brave. Okay? This is going to be scary, but I need you to help me. Crowding. End quote. End quote. Quote 7. End quote 7. Quote 7. Quote 7. End quote 7. Quote 7. End quote 7. End quote 7. End quote. Together, they worked to move the man. Daniel tried to be as careful as possible, supporting his head and neck, but there was no way to know if he was making things worse. The stranger was dead weight, and it took all of Daniel's strength to lift him. Sophie held the car door open and quickly moved to the other side of the back seat. Once the man was positioned as safely as possible across the back seat, Daniel ran back to grab the blanket and tucked it around him. The stranger's breathing was so faint now that Daniel had to watch closely to see if his chest was moving at all. Put your seatbelt on, Sophie, Daniel commanded, as he jumped into the driver's seat. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. As he pulled back onto the road, Sophie's small voice came from the back seat. Dad, his hand is really, really cold. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his daughter holding the stranger's hand in both of hers, trying to warm it up. Keep talking to him, honey, Daniel said, pressing down on the accelerator. Don't let him fall asleep. The speedometer climbed as they raced through the darkness, a father and daughter who had stopped for a dying stranger, not knowing that this single decision would change all of their lives forever. The car's engine roared as Daniel pushed it faster than he'd ever driven on these back roads. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes darting between the dark road ahead and the rearview mirror where he could see Sophie sitting next to the unconscious stranger. He's still breathing, Dad, Sophie said softly, her small hand resting on the man's arm. But it sounds weird. Like it's hard for him. Daniel's throat tightened. He knew that sound. It was getting worse. Keep talking to him, sweetheart. Tell him we're almost there. Can he hear me? I think so. Even when people are unconscious, they can sometimes hear voices. It might help him hold on. Sophie nodded seriously, turning her attention back to the stranger. My dad drives really fast, so we'll be there soon. The man didn't respond, but his eyelids flickered slightly. Daniel grabbed his phone from the cup holder, nearly dropping it as the car hit a bump. He managed to dial the hospital's emergency line while keeping one hand on the wheel. Millbrook General Hospital. How can I direct your call? Emergency room. This is urgent. Daniel's voice was strained. There was a click. Then another voice. ER. This is Nurse Peterson. My name is Daniel Wright. I'm bringing in a man I found on Route 47. He's unconscious. Possible hypothermia. Looks like he was assaulted. He's in bad shape. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Sir, did you call 911? You should wait for... I did call them. They said 40 minutes. He doesn't have 40 minutes. Daniel took a sharp turn, and he heard Sophie brace herself in the back seat. "I'm bringing him in. Please be ready." "All right, sir. We'll have a team standing by. Drive safely." Daniel tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Safely. Right. He was doing at least 70 on a road where the limit was 45, with his 8-year-old daughter in the back seat next to a dying man he didn't know. Nothing about this was safe. But what choice did he have? "Dad?" Sophie's voice was smaller now, scared. "There's something wet on the seat. I think he's bleeding." Daniel's heart lurched. "It's okay, honey. The doctors will fix him. Just keep pressure on it if you can. Use the blanket." He watched in the mirror as Sophie carefully pressed part of the blanket against the man's side. Her hands were shaking, but she was being so brave. Too brave for an 8-year-old. She shouldn't have to be doing this. The stranger let out a low moan, the first real sound he'd made since they'd found him. His head shifted slightly against the seat. "That's good," Daniel said, trying to sound encouraging. "That means he's still fighting. Keep talking to him." "Sophie." "Okay." She took a breath. Mister, we live in a yellow house with a big tree in the front yard. I have a tree house that my dad built for me last summer. Do you have a tree house? Or maybe you built one for your kids when they were little?" Still no response from the man, but Sophie continued anyway. "I'm in 3rd grade. My teacher's name is Mrs. Anderson. And she's really nice except when Tyler pulls hair. Then she gets this look on her face like..." Sophie made a face that Daniel couldn't see, but could hear in her voice. Like, she's trying really hard not to yell. Despite everything, Daniel felt a tiny smile pull at his lips. His daughter was remarkable. Even in the middle of this nightmare, she was trying to help, trying to connect with this stranger who couldn't answer her. The road stretched out ahead, seeming longer than it ever had before. They passed the old Miller farm, then the abandoned gas station. Landmarks Daniel had driven past 1,000 times, but tonight each one felt like a small victory. They were getting closer. "Dad, I can see his wallet," Sophie said suddenly. It fell out of his pocket. "Don't worry about it right now, honey. But what if it has information? Like who to call? The hospital will handle that. Just focus on keeping him warm." The man's breathing changed again, becoming more shallow. Daniel pressed harder on the gas pedal. The speedometer climbed past 75. "Tell me about your soccer game," Daniel said, needing to hear his daughter's voice, needing to feel like something was normal. "Tell me about that goal again." Sophie launched into the story, her voice a little brighter now, and as she talked about the game and her friends, and how the ball curved just right into the corner of the net, Daniel realized she was doing this for both of them, keeping them both calm, keeping them both focused on something other than the barely breathing man in the back seat. They finally hit the main road leading into town. Streetlights appeared, casting orange pools of light across the pavement. Houses with lit windows. Signs of life and civilization. The hospital was only a few more minutes away. "We're almost there," Daniel announced. "You're doing great, Sophie. Just a little longer." "He's so cold, Dad," she said quietly. "Even with the blanket, he's so cold." Daniel could see the blue glow of the hospital's emergency sign in the distance. 2 more miles. They were going to make it. They had to make it. "Mister, we're almost at the hospital," Sophie told the stranger, her voice gentle. "They're going to take good care of you. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay." The man's lips moved slightly, as if he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. His hand twitched under Sophie's. "I think he heard me, Dad." "That's good, honey. That's really good." Daniel turned into the hospital parking lot, not bothering with the main entrance. He drove straight to the emergency room doors, ignoring the no parking signs, and laid on the horn the moment he stopped. The automatic doors burst open, and 3 people in scrubs rushed out with a gurney. A security guard was right behind them. "He's in the back seat," Daniel shouted, jumping out of the car. "Hypothermia, possible internal bleeding." He's been unconscious. The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, carefully extracting the man from the back seat and transferring him to the gurney. Daniel pulled Sophie out and held her close as they watched the stranger being wheeled inside at a run. A doctor stayed behind. A woman with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. "You're the one who brought him in?" "Yes. I found him on Route 47. About 25 minutes ago." "Did you move him from the scene?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes. The ambulance was 40 minutes out. He was dying." The doctor's expression was unreadable. "Come inside. We'll need statements. And that little one needs to get checked out too. There's blood on her hands." Daniel looked down at Sophie and felt his stomach drop. Her hands were indeed stained red, and there were smears on her jacket. She looked down at them too, her eyes going wide. "It's okay, baby," he pulled her close. "It's okay. You were so brave." As they walked into the bright lights of the emergency room, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. He'd made a choice to save a stranger, and now all he could do was hope it was the right one. A nurse directed them to a small waiting room, while another gently took Sophie to wash her hands and check her over. Daniel sank into a plastic chair, his legs suddenly weak. His phone buzzed. 6 missed calls from his sister. Texts from Sophie's soccer coach, asking if everything was okay. He didn't know how to answer that question. He'd put his daughter in a car with a bleeding, unconscious man. He'd broken probably a dozen traffic laws. He'd moved someone who might have had spinal injuries. But the alternative was leaving that man to die alone in a ditch. The waiting room clock ticked loudly in the silence. All Daniel could do now was wait and pray that the stranger would survive, and that his decision to help wouldn't turn into the biggest mistake of his life. The fluorescent lights in the hospital waiting room hummed overhead as Daniel sat with his arm around Sophie. She'd been cleaned up and checked over by a nurse, who said she was fine, just shaken. But Daniel could see the way her hands still trembled slightly, the way she kept looking toward the emergency room doors. A police officer had taken their statements an hour ago, writing everything down in a small notebook. He'd been kind enough, but Daniel could see the questions in his eyes. "Why did you move him? Didn't you know better?" The officer had left, saying someone might follow up in the next few days. It was nearly midnight when the gray-haired doctor finally came out to see them. Her face was tired but composed. "Mr. Wright? The patient is stable. You got him here just in time." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "He's going to be okay? He's in critical condition. But yes, we believe he'll survive. He has hypothermia, 3 broken ribs, internal bruising, and a fractured vertebra in his lower back. He was also severely dehydrated." She paused. "Another 30 minutes and we would have lost him." Sophie squeezed Daniel's hand tight. "Do you know what happened to him?" Daniel asked. "We've contacted the police. It appears he was robbed and assaulted. We found evidence of blunt force trauma. His wallet was empty. No ID on him." The doctor's expression shifted slightly. "We do need to discuss something, though. Moving him may have aggravated his spinal injury. We won't know the full extent until we can do more tests, but there's a possibility of complications." Daniel's stomach dropped. "I didn't know. He was dying." I understand that. You made a difficult choice in an impossible situation." The doctor's tone wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't reassuring either. "We'll know more in the coming days. For now, go home and get some rest. We have your contact information if we need anything." The drive home was quiet. Sophie fell asleep against the window, exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. Daniel's mind raced with everything that had happened. Everything that could still go wrong. When they pulled into their driveway, he gently woke Sophie and carried her inside, tucking her into bed, still in her clothes. She mumbled something about the man being okay, then drifted back to sleep. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't drink, staring at nothing. His phone sat in front of him, full of messages he hadn't answered. He finally typed out a group text to his family. Long story. Everyone's okay. We'll explain tomorrow. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, Daniel made Sophie pancakes, and they sat together at the breakfast table, neither of them saying much. She pushed the food around her plate. Is he really going to be okay? She finally asked. The doctor said he would be, but his back is hurt. You heard what she said. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. We did the right thing, Sophie. We saved his life. But what if we made it worse? It was the same question Daniel had been asking himself all night. Sometimes, doing the right thing is scary. Sometimes it doesn't turn out perfect. But leaving him there would have been worse. She nodded slowly, but he could see the worry still clouding her eyes. The call came 3 days later. Daniel was under the hood of a truck at the garage where he worked when his boss called him over. Phone call for you. Says it's important. The voice on the other end was professional and cold. Mr. Wright? This is Patricia Chen from Berkshire and Associates. I'm an attorney, representing Mr. Howard Morrison, the gentleman you transported to the hospital last week. Daniel's blood ran cold. Is he okay? Mr. Morrison has regained consciousness and is recovering. However, our medical experts have determined that moving him from the scene of the incident significantly worsened his spinal injury. He's now facing the possibility of permanent nerve damage and may require extensive physical therapy, possibly for the rest of his life. I was trying to save him. The ambulance was, We understand your intentions, Mr. Wright. However, intention doesn't negate consequence. Mr. Morrison's family has authorized me to inform you that they're pursuing legal action to recover medical costs, lost wages, and damages related to pain and suffering resulting from your decision to move him. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the gut. How much are we talking about? The medical bills alone are approaching $150,000. With projected ongoing care and other damages, we're looking at a figure north of $200,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel made $38,000 a year. He had maybe $4,000 in savings, and that was supposed to be for Sophie's future, for emergencies. This would destroy them. I need to think about this, Daniel managed to say. Of course, you'll be receiving formal documentation within the week. I'd suggest you consult with an attorney. The call ended. Daniel stood there in the garage, oil staining his hands, his world crumbling around him. That evening, he tried to act normal for Sophie's sake. They had dinner. She did her homework. They watched a show together. But when she went to bed, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills and a calculator, trying to figure out how you pay for something that costs more than you'll make in 5 years. He thought about his wife, about the cancer that had taken her 2 years ago, about the medical bills that had already drained everything they'd saved, about working double shifts and selling their second car and giving up everything just to give her a few more months. And now, this. The story hit the local news 2 days later. Local man faces lawsuit after roadside rescue. Daniel's phone started ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. His sister called, furious that she'd heard about it on Facebook. Sophie's school friends' parents were texting, asking if it was true. At school pickup, Daniel could feel the stares. Some people gave him sympathetic looks. Others whispered as he walked past. Sophie got in the car quietly. Everyone at school is talking about it. I'm sorry, honey. Tyler said his mom said you should have just called 911 and waited. That it's not our job to help people. Tyler. Daniel pulled out of the school parking lot, his jaw tight. What do you think? Sophie was quiet for a moment. I think that man would be dead if we listened to Tyler's mom. Despite everything, Daniel felt a surge of pride in his daughter. That night, Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Anderson, called. Mr. Wright, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've been following what's happening, and I wanted you to know that some of us at the school are organizing a fundraiser, a bake sale to start, maybe a car wash next weekend. Daniel's throat tightened. That's very kind, but I don't think a bake sale is going to make much of a dent in $200,000. Maybe not. But it's a start. And Daniel, what you did was brave. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Enden tels. Enden tels. After she hung up, Daniel sat in the silence of his living room. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching it. He was thinking about that moment, on the dark road, about Sophie's small voice saying, "We have to do something," about the choice that had seemed so clear in that moment, and now seemed so complicated. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Saw your story on the news. Want to help? Here's a link." It was a GoFundMe page. Someone in town had started it without asking him, titled, "Help Daniel Wright, Punished for Saving a Life." There were already donations. $50, $25, $100. Small amounts from people he'd never met. The description told his story, told Sophie's story. It was starting to spread. Daniel didn't know if it would be enough. He didn't know if anything would be enough. But as he sat there reading the comments from strangers offering support, offering prayers, offering whatever they could give, he felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope, small and fragile, but there nonetheless. He just had to hold on and see where it would lead. The GoFundMe page hit $10,000 by the end of the week. Daniel watched the number climb on his phone screen, unable to quite believe it. Strangers from 3 states over were donating $5, $10, whatever they could spare. Each donation came with a comment. "Good Samaritans shouldn't be punished. You did the right thing. Don't let them tell you otherwise. My daughter is Sophie's age. Thank you for teaching her compassion." Daniel had never asked for help like this before. After his wife died, he'd worked extra shifts, fixed cars on weekends, did whatever it took to keep their heads above water. The idea of strangers giving him money made him uncomfortable. But Sophie's college fund was gone, drained to pay the retainer for the lawyer he'd been forced to hire. He didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. The local news came back, this time with a different angle. Community rallies, behind Good Samaritan facing lawsuit. They interviewed Mrs. Anderson, who spoke about Sophie's kindness in the classroom. They talked to Daniel's boss at the garage, who called him the most honest mechanic he'd ever employed. They even got footage of the bake sale at Sophie's school, where 8-year-olds sold cookies to save a man who'd saved a stranger. Sophie's face lit up when she saw herself on TV, carefully counting change for a customer. "Dad! Look! That's me!" Daniel smiled. But his mind was elsewhere. 10,000 was a lot of money, more than he'd ever had at once. But it wasn't even close to 200,000. It wasn't enough. Then something unexpected happened. A video started circulating online. Someone had recorded Sophie at the bake sale. And when asked by a reporter why she was helping, she'd said something Daniel hadn't heard. The camera caught her small voice, clear and certain. "Because if your dad is dying on the side of the road someday, I hope someone stops to help him too. Even if it's scary. Even if it's hard." The video went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed 2 million times. The GoFundMe page exploded. 20,000. 50,000. 75,000. The donations came faster than Daniel could read them. News outlets from bigger cities picked up the story. A morning show in Cleveland wanted to interview them. A podcast about legal cases reached out. Daniel's phone rang constantly with reporters, well-wishers, and people wanting to help. But not everyone was supportive. Daniel was loading groceries into his car when a woman approached him in the parking lot. She was well-dressed, probably in her 50s, with a tight expression on her face. "You're that man from the news," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You know, my brother is a paramedic. What you did was reckless. You could have paralyzed that man." Daniel's jaw tightened. The ambulance was 40 minutes away. "So you've said, but you're not a doctor. You had no business moving him. And now you're all over the internet playing the victim, taking people's money. It's shameful." She walked away before Daniel could respond. He stood there, hands gripping the shopping cart, feeling like he'd been slapped. That night, he couldn't sleep. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had made everything worse. Maybe he was being selfish, letting people donate when he'd made such a terrible mistake. Sophie found him on the couch at 2 in the morning, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" she asked, climbing up next to him. "Just thinking. About the mean lady at the store?" He looked at her, surprised. "You heard about that?" "Jenna's mom told Jenna who told me. She said some lady yelled at you." Sophie leaned against his shoulder. "Was she right? Did we do a bad thing?" "Jenna's mom. Did we do a bad thing?" Daniel wrapped his arm around her. "No, sweetheart. We did what we thought was right. Sometimes people disagree about stuff like that. But we saved him. The doctor said so. We did. But we also might have hurt him more. It's complicated." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I don't think it's complicated. I think he would have died if we left him there. Being alive with a hurt back is better than being dead." Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. His 8-year-old daughter had just summed up what he'd been struggling to articulate for weeks. The next development came from an unexpected source. A doctor from Pittsburgh, someone Daniel had never met, released a video response. She was a specialist in emergency medicine, and she'd reviewed the case details that had been made public. "I've seen some criticism of Mr. Wright's decision to transport this patient," she said, looking directly at the camera. "I want to be very clear. He saved this man's life. In hypothermic shock, with internal bleeding, every minute counts. The choice wasn't between moving him safely or moving him dangerously. The choice was between moving him or letting him die. Mr. Wright made the only ethical choice available to him." She went on to explain the medical realities, the timeline, the options Daniel had faced. Other medical professionals began weighing in, most of them supporting Daniel's decision. A few disagreed, but the tide of professional opinion was shifting in his favor. The GoFundMe reached $100,000. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at the number on his laptop screen. $100,000. From people he'd never met. People who just believed that saving a life shouldn't cost you everything. His lawyer called with news. "The medical experts I've consulted all agree that the spinal fracture existed before you moved Mr. Morrison. Your actions didn't cause it. We have a strong defense." "But the family is still suing?" "Yes. They're claiming that moving him aggravated the existing injury and made recovery more difficult. It's going to be hard to prove one way or another." The lawyer paused. "Daniel, I have to be honest with you. Even with a strong defense, trials are unpredictable, and they're expensive. If we go all the way to court, you're looking at legal fees that could eat up most of that fundraiser money, win or lose." Daniel closed his eyes. "So, what do you recommend?" "We wait. Sometimes these things have a way of working themselves out." 3 days later, Sophie came home from school with a drawing. It was cratered and folded, clearly passed between many hands. When Daniel unfolded it, he saw it was from her art class. She'd drawn the scene from that night. A car stopped on a dark road, a small figure holding an even smaller hand, stars overhead. At the bottom, in careful third-grade handwriting, she'd written, "Heroes don't leave people behind." Her teacher had given her an A+ and written, "Beautiful message, Sophie." Daniel hung it on the refrigerator, right at eye level. That weekend, the community organized something bigger than a bake sale. The local high school football field hosted a benefit event. Food trucks donated their proceeds. Local bands played for free. There was a raffle, a silent auction, a dunk tank featuring local business owners who'd volunteered. Daniel didn't want to go. The attention made him uncomfortable, made him feel like a fraud. But Sophie insisted, and his sister physically pushed him out the door. The parking lot was packed. Daniel and Sophie walked through the entrance, and people started clapping. Not just a few people, dozens of them. Standing ovation from folks Daniel had never met, from neighbors he'd waved to but never spoken with, from parents of Sophie's classmates. A banner stretched across the field. "Millbrook stands with Daniel Wright." Sophie squeezed his hand. See, Dad? People know we did the right thing. The mayor gave a short speech. The high school principal talked about teaching values to the next generation. Mrs. Anderson presented Sophie with a certificate of recognition for courage and compassion. Sophie blushed bright red but accepted it with a shy smile. By the end of the day, the GoFundMe had passed $150,000. The benefit event added another $20,000. Daniel stood at the edge of the football field as the sun set, watching Sophie play with other kids, their laughter carrying across the grass. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, tired of reporters and curiosity seekers, but something made him pick up. Mr. Wright? The voice was unfamiliar, older, with a slight tremor. This is Howard Morrison. I think it's time we talked. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The man he'd saved. The man who was suing him. I'm listening, Daniel said quietly, and the conversation that followed would change everything. Daniel's hand tightened around the phone. Howard Morrison. The man from the ditch. The man whose family was suing him for $200,000. His heart pounded as he walked away from the crowd at the benefit event, finding a quiet spot near the bleachers. Mr. Morrison, Daniel said carefully. How are you feeling? There was a long pause on the other end. When Howard spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I'm alive. That's more than I should be. Thanks to you and your daughter. Daniel didn't know what to say. This wasn't the conversation he'd expected. I need to tell you something, Howard continued. I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks. Unconscious for the first few days. Then in and out. I didn't know what was happening. Didn't know about the lawsuit until 5 days ago. He took a shaky breath. Mr. Wright, I never authorized that legal action. My son and daughter did that on their own. Daniel leaned against the bleachers, his legs suddenly weak. I don't understand. My children and I, we haven't been close for years. Not since their mother passed away. I made mistakes, pushed them away. They've been angry with me for a long time. Howard's voice cracked. When they heard what happened, they saw it as an opportunity. Not to help me, but to get money. They hired that lawyer without ever asking what I wanted. But the medical bills are real. The injuries are real. But Mr. Wright, I was dying on that road. The doctors told me that if I'd been out there another 30 minutes, I wouldn't have made it. You didn't cause my injuries. The men who robbed me and left me for dead did that. Howard paused. I fired the lawyer this morning. I'm dropping the lawsuit. 8. Daniel felt dizzy. He sat down hard on the metal bleachers. You're serious? Completely. I've already signed the paperwork. My children are furious, but this is my life, my decision. What you did was brave and selfless. I won't let you be punished for saving my life. Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. He couldn't speak. There's more, Howard said quietly. I've been following your story from my hospital bed. I've seen what that little girl of yours said, about hoping someone would stop for her dad if he needed help. She's got a good heart. You're raising her right. Thank you, Daniel managed to say. I don't have much, Mr. Wright. I'm a retired teacher living on a pension, but I've made arrangements. The settlement I'm receiving from the investigation into my assault, it's substantial. Those men who hurt me were caught, and there are victim compensation funds involved. I want to set up an education fund for your daughter. $50,000 for her college. Daniel's breath caught. Mr. Morrison. Yes, I do. That little girl sat in the back of your car holding my hand, talking to me, keeping me warm. She was 8 years old, and she chose compassion over fear. That deserves to be rewarded. And more than that, I want to be part of her life, if you'll let me. Part of her life? Howard's voice grew softer. I missed so much with my own children. I was so focused on my career, on being right, that I forgot to just be present. They grew up and away from me, and by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late to fix it. He cleared his throat. I know I'm a stranger. I know I have no right to ask, but I'd like to get to know Sophie. Maybe come to one of her soccer games. Maybe be someone she can talk to. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'd like a chance to do better this time. Daniel looked across the football field and saw Sophie laughing with her friends, her certificate clutched in her hand. He thought about how she'd held a dying man's hand without hesitation, how she'd been brave when he'd been terrified, how she'd never once regretted stopping to help. I think Sophie would like that, Daniel said. I think she'd like that very much. 2 weeks later, Daniel picked Sophie up from school and drove to the hospital. Howard had been transferred to a rehabilitation facility, learning to walk again with the help of a physical therapist. The spinal injury had caused nerve damage, but the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. Sophie clutched a drawing she'd made in art class, this one showing a man with a cane standing next to a little girl and her dad. She'd been nervous all morning, asking questions about what to say. What if he didn't remember her? What if he was scary? He's not scary, Daniel assured her. He's just a man who's very grateful to meet you properly this time. They found Howard in the therapy room, working his way across a set of parallel bars. He was thinner than Daniel remembered from that night. His hair completely white, but his eyes were sharp and kind. When he saw them, his face broke into a wide smile. "Sophie," he said, his voice warm. Sophie giggled nervously. She approached slowly, then held out her drawing. "I made this for you." Howard took it with shaking hands, studying it carefully. "This is beautiful. Is this us?" "Yeah, that's you, and that's me and my dad. I drew you walking because the nurses said, 'You're doing really good in therapy.' I am doing good, thanks to you." Howard gestured to a chair nearby. "Come sit with me. Tell me about school. Tell me about soccer. Tell me everything." And Sophie did. She talked about her teacher and her friends and the goal she'd scored last week. She told him about the treehouse and her favorite books, and how she was learning to make grilled cheese by herself. Howard listened to every word like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard. Daniel watched from a few feet away, his throat tight with emotion. This moment felt impossible. A month ago, they'd been strangers bound by tragedy. Now, they were something else. Not quite family, but not strangers anymore either. Over the following months, Howard became a fixture in their lives. He came to Sophie's soccer games, cheering louder than anyone else despite still needing his cane. He helped her with homework, his years as a teacher making him a natural tutor. He shared stories about his own childhood, about the mistakes he'd made, about the lessons he'd learned too late. For Daniel, Howard became something unexpected. A friend. Someone who understood loss and regret. Someone who'd been given a second chance and was determined not to waste it. The GoFundMe money, once meant for legal defense, was used differently. Daniel paid off the mortgage on their house. He put money aside for emergencies. He donated $10,000 back to the community that had supported him, funding a scholarship for local students pursuing careers in emergency services. Sophie's education fund from Howard sat untouched in an account, growing steadily, waiting for the day she'd head off to college. One evening, 6 months after that night on the dark road, Daniel and Sophie sat with Howard on their front porch. Sophie was showing him a photo album from when her mom was alive, telling stories she barely remembered but that Daniel had kept alive for her. "Your mom would be proud of you," Howard said softly, looking at a picture of Sophie as a toddler. "Both of you." Daniel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "You know what's funny?" Howard continued. "My kids called last week, first time in 2 years. They wanted to apologize. They saw all the news coverage, saw what really happened. They're working on themselves, going to therapy. We're taking it slow, but there's hope." He smiled. "Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best changes." Sophie leaned against Howard's shoulder, comfortable in a way that had taken no time at all to develop. "I'm glad we stopped that night." "Me too, kiddo. Me too." As the sun set over their small yellow house, Daniel thought about the choices we make in critical moments. How a single decision can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. How doing the right thing isn't always safe or easy or guaranteed to work out. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, it leads to exactly where you need to be. They'd saved a stranger's life that cold November night. What Daniel hadn't known was that the stranger would save them right back, not from death, but from something just as important. The isolation of grief. The weight of doing it all alone. Sophie had been right from the beginning. Heroes don't leave people behind. And sometimes, the people you save become the family you never knew you needed.